the MUI rules. Okay? And you can see this is set through the MUI rule training for direct support professionals. I'm not going to read through all of this because we would be here for hours just reading all of this, but I'm going to scroll down and just touch on a few of the important parts. And then if you need more of this information, like I said, it should be printed at your houses from the past. But if you need more and you'd like the link or anything, I can send it to you as well. So the purpose of this particular training addresses unusual incidents, MUI rule definition, reporting requirements, patterns and trends, abuser registry, alerts, and rights. For this particular quality improvement process, they're looking at the incident, the immediate action you took, so what you did right at that moment, investigation initiated, so when administration or the county investigators, people like that, start to look into the situation. Identify cause and contributing factors. And this is something too that you all can give some input with when you're writing your incident reports, to really think about those causes and contributing factors. You know, think about the things that you think might have led to this particular incident. And then the prevention planning. That's another really important key feature. The prevention planning is another area where we need your input. We want you to be able to tell us what you think would help this from happening again, so we can try to get that onto the prevention plan. Now, unusual incidents means an event or occurrence involving an individual that is not consistent with routine operations, policies, and procedures, or the individual's care or service plan, but is not a major unusual incident. Unusual incidents include, but is not limited to, dental injuries, falls, injury that is not a significant injury, medication errors without a likely risk to health and welfare, overnight relocation due to fire, natural disaster, mechanical failure, incident involving two individuals that serve that is not a peer-to-peer act that is not a major unusual incident, rights code violations, unapproved behavioral support without a likely risk to health and welfare, emergency room or urgent care treatment, program implementation incidents. And here they go through the problematic implementation of UI. An unusual incident involves the failure to carry out a person-centered plan when such failure causes minimal or no risk. Examples here, where they're talking about different incidents. We get into some more of the specifics, okay, but we're not going to go through and give those examples where you all know this information already. And if there's something that you're not sure whether it's a UI or MUI, people like myself or the nurses will definitely help address that. And that's something that we're going to talk about as for getting those details down to help us determine that, okay? With the reporting. So the reporting requirements. Any person who provides any type of service to an individual with developmental disabilities. Your report should be clear, legible, and easy to read. Okay, so like when you're writing it, try to write neatly so we can make sure we can read all of those details. It should answer what, when, where, who, and why if known. Okay, so those important things that we need to have. What? So what happened? And as many details as you can give us. When it happened, so if you know the exact time, that's great. If you don't know the exact minute, that type of thing, that's okay. But just when. Where? So very specifically, where were they? Like what room? Different things within the house that can give those features. Who was involved? Whether the who is other clients, staff, those kind of details. And why, if you know. Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes we might have some guesses, and then that could lead to our contributing factors as well. The 13 required elements to an incident report, they include but are not limited to name, date, location, and description. So on our incident report forms that the nurses or I put into the computer system, we have to fill in all of those different categories. Unusual incident requirements make preventative measures the most important part, okay? So the preventative measures, and this is where we need your input. what you think can help prevent it from happening again. Okay? The next one, providers are required to investigate all unusual incidents, and both unusual and major unusual. Always document what actions were taken to ensure the health and welfare of any at-risk individuals. Okay? So the actions that you took immediately. And they give us some examples here, like call 911, initiate the first aid, things like that. Okay? For major unusual incidents means the alleged, suspected, or actual occurrence of an incident when there is reason to believe the incident has occurred. There are 19 categories there, and I gave you a separate sheet at the houses that lists all of those. And we, again, could talk about these for quite a long time, where, this is information that you have. If you need more information on it, please reach out to me. Take immediate action to protect all at-risk individuals, which shall include immediate or ongoing medical attention as appropriate, removal of an employee from direct contact with any individual an employee is alleged to have been involved in physical abuse or sexual abuse, such as the time as the provider has reasonably determined that such removal is no longer necessary. Other necessary measures to protect the health and welfare of at-risk individuals. These are the ones that have to be reported within 4 hours. So you will need to report it. We ask that you report it within 15 minutes. And I know that that's fast sometimes, when you're dealing with an MUI, but that within 15 minutes of it happening, if you can get the nurse to help you, if there's not a nurse available, other staff, whatever the situation might be, but then it has to be reported to the administrator, the director of nursing, the guardian, all those people have to be contacted. We really try to do that within 15 minutes. So then if it's something that, needs further attention, or if there's, certain things that have to happen within that time period, but then the 4-hour reporting is when it has to get into the computer system to the county. They used to have a number that you would just call, and I guess they still do have a number, but now the nurses and I just entered into the computer, and they have, it's called the BRICCO system. So within the BRICCO system, we report it within the 4 hours. And these are accidental or suspicious death, exploitation, misappropriation, neglect, peer-to-peer act, physical abuse, prohibited sexual abuse, verbal abuse, inquire from the media about an MUI. That part about the inquiry about the media, that's basically like if somebody like from the newspaper or something came and was trying to take pictures or ask you questions about a situation or that kind of thing, and we talked about this with somebody in the past where we just, the media, we can't allow them in or to, talk to people, things like that without legal actions being taken there. So that's something too that it's sort of an unusual one that you probably won't really hear about too much, but it can happen. These are some more of the reporting responsibilities, but that's not necessarily that you all have to worry about. The nurses and I would worry about those ones. What should you expect? So your role in the incident process, if you're the primary person involved, do you have to cooperate? In this case, yes. And when they say cooperate, whether it's talking to the nurse or the administrative staff, talking to the county investigator, the police, whoever might be involved, you're required to cooperate with them. You can't just be like, no, I'm not talking about it. If somebody asks you about a particular incident, you are required to talk about it. And granted, it has to be in the appropriate authority. So we don't want to violate HIPAA laws and talk about it with just random people. It has to be somebody who is in the correct position, like a county MUI investigator or a police officer. What does substantiation mean? That means basically that after it's been investigated, we say, yes, we think it really did happen. Okay? That's a tricky one sometimes, but that's something that then the county and also the state level will address as well. Now this part, it goes through like how many events. I'm not going to go through all of this information, but if you're interested, you can see here, like this was in 2018. The highest category here is significant injury. So somebody getting hurt, okay? Unapproved behavior supports. We talked about this a little bit yesterday too, where if there's an emergency situation or there's a really bad peer-to-peer or something, and you have to do an unapproved behavior support, you can do that, but we still have to report it. Now and it's not to say that you did anything wrong, it's just that if it's not part of their plan and it's not considered just a UI, then it would go into this category of MUIs because we have to recognize that you took all of these steps to try to keep everybody safe, but you still had to do the escort, or somebody was going to run into the road and you had to grab them, and then there was, problems after that, things like that. So anyway, it's interesting, I think, to see that that is a pretty big category. The next category that's really, I'm sorry, this large blue carries unanticipated hospitalizations, which we know we have tons of those. Anytime anybody gets sick and they get sent to the hospital, that's unanticipated. So anytime anybody goes to the hospital, if they are admitted, it's considered an MY. And so, that's a big category. But then the next one was the injury. And then you can see the peer-to-peers. That's another big one. So there with the peer-to-peers. Those are all pretty common ones throughout the state. This is for the state of Ohio. So anyway, it breaks it down with more details, percentages, so giving you some data. I am not going to go through all of these features right now, because like I said, this is, I know it's a review for you. I do want to do one thing really quick, just because, again, this is kind of a requirement to address, which I need to add it to our agenda as part of the MUI training, is the abuser registry. I just need to make you all aware of it, which again, if you're not new, that you have already had your orientation. Some of you have been here for almost 10 years, right? Or more. Anybody? Yesterday we had one person that had been here for 30 years, 2 people for 11 years, things like that. It's so nice to see the employees that have that compassion to stay in a challenging field like this. So anyway, the abuser registry, real quick, I'll read through this. Established under Ohio law, the abuser registry lists the names of people who have committed acts of abuse, neglect, misappropriation, failure to report, or physical prohibited sexual relations. People who have committed a registry offense are prohibited from working with people with developmental disabilities for a minimum of 1 year. Prevents persons who were DD employees from working on this field. As of October 10, 2019, there are 953 people placed on the abuser registry. Again, this is not something that we do on our own. It would be something that would be investigated by the county, by the state, and the police involvement, things like that too. This is not something that is taken lightly. There's a number of things that go into these investigations. So you can see they have an external committee. There's a final decision made by the director. So looking at, we talked about Director Davis, people like that would be involved if that were the case, with somebody needing to be investigated for the abuser registry. Let's see if I can scroll down really quick. Oh, the rights, we talked about a little bit, which the order on this one, I wanted to address the rights a little bit already, but there is more information on residents' rights on this part. They're going through just the basic ones as far as clean place to live, a place to be alone, food that's good for you, be able to go to church, the doctor, dentist, so forth. So as we read through with these kind of things, you can see that they're all listed. They just, on this one, abbreviated it a little bit. It gives you the numbers to contact. Like I said, our county board still has a phone number, but generally we just put it into the computer and then they get an alert right away in the computer. Any questions with that part? If you do, if you want to verbalize that now, you can, or write it down on your Post-it notes and give those to me. I'm going to show you a video segment. So while you're watching this video, if you think of other questions, feel free to write those down. The video segment that I'm going to show you is, let me make sure I get it in the right spot.
Lemonade?
No, I don't want lemonade. I don't know why. I think I do though. I think these are starting, you know how on YouTube, like one video will start and then the next one goes right after it? think it's trying to progress to the next video. So I want to introduce this person first before I show you the video. The person on this video is Scott Phillips. I have met Scott Phillips a few times. My mom has worked on committees with him, and he is the state overseer for all MUIs. And he's worked, I think he probably started as a direct care person as well, and at the time before they were considered direct support professionals, and worked his way through the industry and is very, very knowledgeable, and is also a resource that, you know, if we needed to, we could reach out to, you know, and ask for assistance with certain things like that, where he's just going to do another quick video segment with 5 things that you need to know about MUIs. And I like this video because it just kind of summarizes what that PowerPoint that I showed you talked about, where he just sort of touches base on sort of the key features in a very articulated way, that he, you know, makes it so that it's a nice summary to what we were just reading through.
Hi, I'm Scott Phillips with the MUI unit, Major Unusual Incident Unit at the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. Would like to talk to you today about 5 things that are important to our MUI process. So the first thing to know about UI and MUI investigations is, how do you define them? What's an MUI? What's a UI? And as you guys know, that those are issues or events that happen in your life that impact your health and welfare. An MUI is a more higher level, highly involved situation where we have maybe a broken bone, or an abuse allegation, or someone stole your money, or you're hospitalized. That's more of the MUI allegation, and that's going to receive a formal investigation from an investigative agent of the county board. A UI investigation is still very important and is significant, but usually it doesn't rise to the level of an MUI definition. So you might, step off a curb and twist your ankle, or you might fall down and scratch your knee. Those are all still important issues and incidents that impact your health and welfare, but they don't meet an MUI definition, and typically providers of service are doing the follow-up and the investigation related to the UI. The second step is the immediate actions. Whenever there's an incident that happens, there's immediate action that takes place to protect you or to protect individuals that we support. And what that means is that the injury itself is taken care of, that we make sure that people are healthy and well. If it's an incident that involves a potential assault, we make sure that people are separated. But we want to make sure that we take that immediate action that's going to protect that person and make sure that they are healthy and well. Number 3, we're going to talk about investigations. And as you guys know, if an incident's reported as a major unusual incident, it's going to receive an administrative investigation. And the important pieces of that investigation is to gather information to try to find out what happened in order to develop cause and contributing factors, what led up to that incident, and then that will help drive a prevention plan that's going to keep that from happening in the future. So really important elements of the investigation piece: gather facts, get information, determine the cause that happened, and then develop those prevention plans to keep people healthy and safe. Step 4, a piece of that investigation process that I mentioned is the cause and contributing factors. And what that really means is, let's try to determine what happened that led up to the incident. For example, if you stepped off the curb and you twisted your ankle and you broke it, what are the things that led up to that that maybe caused that problem? Was there a lighting issue? Did you trip on something? Was it a medication maybe that you had that made you feel unsteady? What are those causes and contributing factors, so that we can make sure we look into those and try to solve those? And then the last step in the MUI investigation is prevention planning, and that's really important, because the whole reason that we have a quality health and welfare improvement process, MUI, UI process, is to try to protect and prevent people from getting hurt. So the better job we do of gathering information, investigating, determining causes, allows us to create that prevention plan that's going to allow the team to work with individuals and families to try to make sure that efforts are put in place to avoid that happening in the future. And that's truly what a quality improvement process is. You find out something happened, you figure out what was wrong with it, you try to put something in place, and hopefully then it doesn't happen again in the future. For more information, visit the Health and Welfare section at dodd.ohio.gov.
Now I am going to go back to our agenda. you rest assured that we are almost done. We have two more things that are on our agenda. One is the emergency plan. And this particular emergency plan is in every house. Hopefully you know where it is. I took this one from Hume the other day to use as an example, which I will return to them right away so they have it, if they need it. All staff need to be familiar with this because we know that emergencies can happen. We know that there is the possibility of an actual emergency. And this plan is something that we have developed to show the policies and the procedures to address an emergency situation. We typically will have like a practice thing, like where the police would come up and talk to us and things like that. We've done a lot of that, like with fire or tornadoes, things like that. And this particular year, our entire state has been put in an emergency. So a state of emergency is part of this plan. Well, the state of emergency that we had this year just happened to be a pandemic. Well, when I create our hazard vulnerability assessment, I have to look at what's the likelihood that this is going to happen. Like, what's the likelihood that we're going to have a hurricane? We're not. And we're in Ohio. What's the likelihood that we're going to have a tornado? Good chance. You know, hopefully it wouldn't be too severe, but there's definitely a chance. And then the power might go out, or you know, we might have damage to the roof or things like that. You know, those are reasonable things to say might happen. A pandemic? I have like a 0 score for that. I'm like, what's the likelihood that a pandemic's going to happen? They only happen 100 years. Like every 100 years is known to have a pandemic. Well, this year just happened to be that year. So here we are, you know, taking all these measures that we put into place. And so that is incorporated into your emergency plan as well. And I know you've had to read through tons of information. We've had lots of training, like with the nurses helping you with the PPE and the sanitizing and temperature checks and all the health screenings that we do for the staff, the residents, limiting visitors. You know, all of those things are really part of our emergency plan because the pandemic has put us in a state of emergency. And we're still in that state of emergency. Even though 94% of our residents are vaccinated for the coronavirus, we still follow these parameters, and we're still trying to keep people as safe as possible. The requirements will remain in place, and you need to be familiar with those. So some of those are put into this particular binder, and I know that you have already had your in-services with all of those kind of things too, like to know as far as the checks and keeping track of all the health screenings for each individual on every shift, or you know, how to address like visitors that want to come in, or you know, different things that we've had to do that add one more task for your busy job. But I do want to address a couple things real quick in this emergency plan binder, because again, there's a lot of information in here, and hopefully you've read through it and you're familiar with it, but a few things that are really key features. And again, find this binder in your house, know where they keep it. When you have a little bit of downtime, read through it. Okay? So just like with the person-centered plans and things like that, the more knowledge you have, the easier your job will be. So if there's nuclear power disaster, if there's a train derailment, if there's any of those crazy things that could happen, this plan will address it. Okay? And obviously, in a real emergency, we probably will have to make changes to this, but at least this is what we're saying we'll attempt to do, or this is what we think we'll do. In a real emergency, we will also take guidelines from the EMA, the emergency medical or authorities, that will then tell us, like, you know, if we need to relocate to somewhere, or if there's going to be a power outage for many days, or you know, different things like that, that we would have to take guidance from the fire, the police, and the EMA. And those contacts and that information's in there. So even like in this plan, it has those phone numbers. It has our vector security phone numbers. It has the Asheville County EMA, the fire department. You know, so those are things that you can be familiar with right here in this binder. A couple other things I want you to make sure that you know, like with your fire evacuation policy. So if you're working at Walnut, you're going to evacuate to the sidewalk or the backyard. depending on which door, you get out when there's a real fire, right? Hume, back parking lot. Ruth and Matthew, the sidewalk or the backyard. Victory, the front yard. Joshua, the grassed area across the street from the driveway. Bridalwood, the end of the cul-de-sac. Celebration, the public sidewalk. Any questions on those ones for fire? I know you've all had your fire training and everything, that's common information, right? Tornado one, I just wanted to review these locations too. Typically for tornadoes, we say the basement or the bathroom. We know some of our houses don't have a basement, or like Joshua, the basement is really old and it's not a secure structure. And you have to access it from the outside of the house, so that's totally not a possibility with the residents there. But Walnut, since there's no basement, we do the bathroom. Victory, bathroom. Now Joshua, we have it listed also as the part under the stairwell, which I know they put some filing cabinets, which we need to address that to make sure that if that's where some of the residents would go, because that house, the bathrooms also have windows. So the fire department, they've reviewed this plan and they're familiar with it, where, in reality, you might need to go into the bathroom, like, especially having 8 guys, and we know how the individuals are there in a real situation. If there's a tornado, and not just at Joshua, but at any house, this is going to be a challenge, right? But it could happen. And so you need to kind of think about how you would react in that setting and the role that you need to take, right? And how you're going to handle that emergency situation. Even looking at the chain of command of like who's in charge. Since we have all separate houses now, the staff person, the direct support professional is in charge. I can't be in charge, I'm not in the house. Whoever's there at that given moment, they've got to call the shots. And if we were in our old building, with all 50 residents together, maybe the nurse would be the person in charge. But the nurse can't be in all the houses and all the time. So we have it in plan that, you can report to other authority figures, but you have to be the person who's in charge at that moment. You've got to make the decisions of what you're going to do to keep everybody safe. Okay? The other one's I'm sorry, I got distracted on that, thinking about our situation. Basement at Celebration, Ruth and Matthew bathrooms, Hume basement, and Bridalwood bathrooms. Okay. Any questions on those locations or that information? Okay, and like I said, there's so much information in here that I know a lot of you are familiar with and everything that you can read through. If you have questions again on any of these things, and I know I send that out with my in-services, that if you have questions, please ask. Send me an email, that sort of thing. Write a note, leave a note, okay? The last part in here that we added is just the part with the pandemic, as far as what they call infection control. So this particularly addresses the coronavirus COVID-19, and then we talked about the exposure assessments, the symptoms, procedures for what you'll do, those things, we've had to deal with. This was a real implementation this year of that particular type of infection control. Looking at the symptoms of fever, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, sore throat, any of those things that we have listed that are on all of those screening checks. So you do need to make sure that you're familiar with all of those things, and that you know that this information is here for you to read through if you need more information. And please feel free to reach out to the nurses, reach out to myself. And if you want to just take a note, like if you're thinking of something, you write it down, send it to the office, send me an email, text is okay too. I like email best, so if anybody doesn't email and they want to establish an email address, that would be really beneficial. The reason I like email best is because then if, say it's a nursing question, or I need input from the nurse, or I need Alex to help me with something, or Joe, or somebody like that, Jacob, those people I can email it to. And sometimes text is fine too. We do a lot of like group texts and things like that with the nurses and other people who can help assist with different issues. But do feel free to reach out, even if you think it's something minor, or if it's something that you've been asking about that's not being addressed, please do so. Okay. All right, one last segment. We have a positive culture exercise. And this particular positive culture exercise, I want you to be a little bit reflective on. And I want to end with this really positive note because I want you to know how much we appreciate you. I want you to know how valued you are. You are, when we talk about the core values of the DSP, you are so, so important. This particular field needs people who display those core values. We need you to be the ones who give that day in and day out care. And I can sit at a computer all day long. You know, I can go on webinars, I can meet in conferences, things like that. But without you and the compassion that you have through empathy, kindness, curiosity, patience, consistency, support, all of those features that you display, that's what really makes the lives of our clients as best they can be. So please keep those core values in mind. And I want you right now to think about how valuable you are. On your Post-it note, I want you to think of one really positive trait about yourself. You know, it could be anything. It could be, I'm smart. Or it could be, I'm a really good friend. Or it could be, I'm really good at my job. Okay? Think of one positive thing about yourself. And then I want one positive thing about your job. So one particular thing that you feel really positive about as being a direct support professional here at Homestead Residential. Okay? So think of one really positive trait of yourself and your job.